Well, guys, my name's Adam Baugh, and I work with More Spa, and together Alex Hayes and I help our clients and folks navigate the zoning process at the city. With us today is a number of the team, including the folks from Levine 140, Alan Robinson, as well as our friends for the design team, Alan Bodwin and Rachel, as well as our golf course team, which includes Forrest Richardson. So I think what we've tried to do is bring all the different project consultants together, because there will likely be some questions, and I don't want to fake my way through those answers. I'd rather turn over to the professionals who can best answer some of your questions. We are just really grateful you guys are giving us a chance to share this with you today. When we started this project in January with our first neighborhood meeting, I'll put it very bluntly and directly, we got our butts kicked, and I think we learned some lessons there. And it was hard. It was hard to hear. We thought we had good ideas, but it's been very helpful for us to hear that. So what you're going to see today is the progression of this case and project and how it's evolved and going forward. So what we'll probably do is have a little bit of, through the slides today, we'll show you where we started, where we're going, what we're hoping to do with the golf course, what we're hoping to do with the new residential product, what we're looking to change with the REMA Amendment, and some design guidelines that help create a better product, and maybe some of the next steps going forward. What you don't see on the agenda, but is, if I could say, a number 8 on this list would be questions and answers. So we will reserve questions until the end, but I want to make sure that I can get through this presentation, because I think a lot of your questions might be answered. And the way we'll do the questions and the answers at the end of the meeting is I'll just ask you to type your name in the chat box. You can see at the bottom of your screen a chat function. You don't actually have to type your question there. If you just type your name, then that lets us know that you're interested in asking a question, and then Alex will unmute you to ask the question. And one of the reasons why we do the muting is so that way people aren't talking to you at the exact same time and asking questions at the same time and making it difficult. In the normal neighbor meetings, we've been really, I think, had really good dialogue in the way we ran them and given plenty of time for question and answer. So we will be here as long as you guys have questions tonight. That order just makes it simpler for us to execute it. So with that being said, let's turn over to the next slide. I think I kind of covered this, but between Norris Design, Golf Course Architects, National Golf Foundation, Landscapes Unlimited, you can start to see the full complement of the team that we've assembled to create a better golf course community together. Next slide. So I mentioned where we started. I should let you know that Levine 140 has owned the property for about sometime at the end of last year, 14 months or so. But the reality is a lot of the condition that you see the golf course today predated their ownership. And as they looked at the property, it felt like they could do something better than the condition it's been left in by the prior owners. Recognizing, though, that once they got into it, how much deferred maintenance existed kind of shocked them. For example, as they looked at the irrigation and other components, realizing it was going to require a significant amount of work. So when we started in January, we thought we would bring in a proposal that has a variety of different products, apartments, townhomes, all the way up to regular homes. And then on the rest of the golf course, we thought we would turn to open space areas for the community to enjoy. So our thinking at the time was having areas for parks and playgrounds and tot lots, pickleball courts and volleyball courts and basketball courts and jogging areas. And we really thought it was a good plan, a good idea, but frankly, I think we just completely misunderstood the importance of the golf course to your community. And as we had that first meeting, we had a tremendous turnout. And I joked the last time, but I'm sort of serious when I say this. I worried if I was going to have air in my tires when I walked out of that first meeting. It was just very clear to us that we had misjudged and missed the mark on what this community desires and needs. And I think our failed assumptions really sent us back to the drawing board to revisit what we need to do. Some feedback from that meeting was, we want a golf course. Other feedback was, we don't want apartments. We want homes. And we want security, and we want improved gated signs. And so we started to put out a survey And the survey started to indicate to us what were the key, most
But
important.
they're pretty much going over quite a bit what we've already.
Alex, is there a way to mute that one individual?
Because they're catching up to people who didn't see it.
Yeah.
If I might ask, yeah, there we go. Thank you. So what, and I know a lot of you have heard this before, but I know there's probably a number of people who are hearing this for the first time. So I feel like it's probably important I just rewind a little bit to help you know where we've been, so you know where we're going. And so this feedback and survey really helped us understand what are the key things. And with this in mind, we started to assemble the right complement teams, right complement of teammates. So we didn't have a golf course designer on this project when we started, and we didn't have a land planner or a landscape architect. And we just learned pretty quick, we've got to really come up with a plan that includes golf as a primary amenity. So if you go to like some of the next slides, Alex, thank you. Yeah. We hired Forrest Richardson. Forrest Richardson at Richardson Dannard Golf Course Architects does this day in and day out across the country. I think they have 32 or more different sites that are in a state of disrepair or needing redevelopment in a form like this. And so we just knew that if we're going to have a golf course here, we need an expert involved. It can't be us. We would need people who do this daily and know what to, how to execute it. And so Forrest started to put together what it's going to take to restore the existing golf course. And we shared this in our prime meetings, but it's a budget about $12 to $15 million if we just restore the existing golf course. And that's because your lakes need new lining, all the irrigation has failed, has to be ripped out and reinstalled. The clubhouse is in disrepair. All the clubhouse amenities, including the pro shop and the carts and the cart barn, are all gone. They were taken by the prior owners. New landscaping needs to be redone, everything. And so we just realized that if we were just to restart what we already have right now, it's in a significant capital raise and also a significant amount of time to do that. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. In some of the next slides, you'll start to see when you add in some of the contingencies and cost inflation, and these numbers have changed, by the way, in the 8 months that we've been involved. They've only gone up. We realized that that type of a lift is very difficult to execute. And this golf course has gone through, I think, 4 or 5 different owners in the time it's existed, which tells you it has had some struggles to maintain viability. And so we've had to take that into consideration on how do we build a new golf course, but one that can be successful and not fail like the prior owners have. And so as a result, we started to look at what are some key planning considerations. And those planning considerations include things like providing golf for all the neighbors behind houses where there's an existing golf behind the backyard. We want to maintain that golf behind the backyard. But for Forrest, and as he started to do the market study, recognizing that golf today, at least in this area, plays at a different pace and rhythm and different demands. So we had to get something both marketable and sustainable, and making sure they had adequate buffers by from the golf to the existing homes, but also creating some new spaces for new homes. We realized that the HOA does not want to fund this. I don't think wants to own it, and so our need to redevelop it has to be on our own dime without asking any other property owners in the area to pitch in for it. We know that that golf course, when it is vibrant, your community thrives, and when it is dormant, it can have a opposite effect on our community. So we recognize that restoring it to its glory is needed, but it's going to have to be in a different form. And I think as Forrest started to outline to us what needs to happen, he looked at the lakes, the way the golf course plays, the number of holes for each golf course, how the clubhouse works, where the maintenance yards need to go, where new amenities need to be, like golf simulators and putting greens, and truthfully trying to figure out how you restore golf while creating new residential opportunities that lift housing prices. So I think those are the primary considerations. I'm going to turn it over to Forrest. He might want to unmute himself so he can talk through a little bit about the next slide, which is the National Golf Foundation market study. And then Forrest, I think I'll let you take control of the presentation as you start to talk through how you start to re-envision a new course here.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
And I am up. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate Adam's comments, and I will say that we kind of came into this after some assumptions were made, and but it's been exciting. All of the meetings that I've been to, while we've had questions and certain concerns, it's been very, very positive. And I'll just take you through a brief summary of the market study. The National Golf Foundation is in the United States, it's the leading authority on all things golf statistics wise. They're the ones that track golfers by zip code, by demographic and ecographics. And they came in and looked at this site. They understood the problem, as the golf course has not been sustainable in the past. And so they made some comments to us that if we were to downsize the golf course responsibly to free up some land for development, yet keep the golf course behind the homes that have it today, as Adam mentioned, that there were certain things they felt were important. Number one, having more holes than fewer holes. So the opportunity to create just a 9-hole golf course was not near as economically viable as creating a short course with multiple holes, so that we could host more people for tournaments and have more players on the golf course. So that was one thing. They also felt that replacing the practice amenity was important with simulators. As you all know, or many of you know, that the practice range was sold off and is not owned by Levine 140. And so we're without a practice range. And in today's world, that's okay, because we have this technology that allows players to use simulators and be in a 15 by 20 foot space and know how far their ball would travel and all sorts of neat data, plus the gaming part of it. They also felt that food and beverage was very important, and that this clubhouse that we have inherited be sort of returned to the neighborhood point of pride that it was 20 some years ago, when it was an active grill and bar and place that you could walk down from the Cotton Fields neighborhood and enjoy dinner or lunch or whatever. So these are some of their findings. I'm going to let you or Alex advance the slides here, Adam. And I'm going to just real briefly, I know many of you have been in these meetings before, but the plan that we came up with is about 2/3 of the existing golf course would remain in golf use. Every home, as I mentioned, that backs up to golf today would have golf in the new plan. We have 2 returning loops of 9 holes, and we have 2 bonus holes, and those holes can be combined to create a par 4 opportunity. So at certain times when the golf course is operated, it can be a par 56 18-hole course. At other times, it might be operated as a 20-hole par 3 course. We've conformed to the NGF National Golf Foundation list of desirable features. We also have built in, you can play this golf course in different formats. So there's little loops of holes. You can play all 18 or 20, or you can play half of them, or even 5 or 7. And we've kept all of the homes in the community on the left side of the golf hole, which is important because that's predominantly where missed shots will go, is to the right as opposed to the left. And so we've tried to keep the cart paths and the golf holes in about the same locations as you're used to. The maintenance shed is proposed to be moved over to the 59th Avenue area. You'll see that on the plan. And as I said earlier, the goal here is to responsibly create some land for new development, which pays for everything. And one of the things that I try to impart, sometimes I forget, but I haven't tonight because I wrote it down before this meeting. And that is that we're really interested in the buffers that the golf creates to be quality. And so a lot of people think of the dimension, like, well, okay, you have new homes 250 feet away. Well, we understand that, but I think the key in looking at the plan, and what I'd encourage everyone to do, is the quality of that open space is really what's important. It's not always the dimension of how many feet, but it's what's in that dimension. And right now, we all know there's nothing in that area. And we'll show you some pictures of what the golf course is intended to look like. So this is the plan. The pink areas are the areas that Norris Design will cover as far as new residential homes, single family homes. The golf course here is shown where it exists today for the most part. And you can see that there's 3 corridors. There's the western corridor, which is the top of your screen. That's the area along 59th Avenue. And then the middle corridor, which is where the clubhouse is, and then extending north. And then what we call the eastern corridor, which is currently where holes 10 through 18 play, that goes up the east side. So the pink areas are where we're proposing development. And you can see here how the golf course articulates. Adam mentioned the 2 lakes. They will remain in their current locations in order to meet state Department of Water Resource guidelines. We are proposing that the big lake, which if you have your cursor, maybe Alex, you could highlight the big lake. The big lake, which is, a lot of people think it's owned by the HOA, but it's part of the golf parcel, and it exists in an area, but in the neighborhood. We would slightly reduce that size of the lake to meet state guidelines of water surface by maybe just as a rough number, maybe taking 15 or 20 feet around the edges of the lake and restoring that to landscaping and trees. But the lake would pretty much look just like it looks today. And then the lake on the finishing hole by the clubhouse would also remain in its current location. When I say it would look like it is today, I mean the size of it and the mass of it. We'll show you some pictures of how we anticipate improving the landscape. You go to the next slide. Here's an example on the west side, the 59th Avenue side, of what's there today and how the new golf hole would fit into this quality open space between the existing homes and the proposed homes along 59th Avenue. So you're looking at 2 different landscapes in these pictures. This is the north side up along Southern, where there's now 2 golf holes. And in the plan, we would have the 1 golf hole with the new single family homes up against Southern Avenue to the north of the existing homes. So you're looking at 2 landscapes here, the detention basins, which are the flowery, more native looking areas, and then the decomposed granite areas, which are the areas that are in between the tee and the green. And the last one is the finishing hole, the current 18th hole, where we have this lake that I mentioned earlier. Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have that. Never mind, forget that. That's another picture for another time. So I can answer questions at the end, as Adam mentioned, but I think right now that's kind of an overview of the golf, and I'll turn it back over to some of these REMA discussion points.
Thank you, Forrest. I appreciate that. So for the audience that, and I guess I'm gonna apologize first and foremost. I don't know how many of you participated in these prior meetings. We've had a lot of them, and we've had, I think, building success, momentum, but I sort of have to recognize that there's probably folks in this first meeting who haven't been able to attend any of our meetings. So I apologize if I sound a little redundant or repetitive on some of these facts, but I know these are important issues. I didn't want to move through them too quickly. But one of the key considerations that we've heard all along, and we recognize is the reality of the situation, is a REMA. A REMA, for lack of a better word, are very similar to CC&Rs. Essentially, it's a governing document with legal binding language that has limitations on how this property can be used. And while we think we've got a great plan, unless the REMA can be amended, we can't do anything that we're proposing. And so a lot of people have asked, what is the REMA? What does it say? And what are you proposing to change in it? And I think we're at the point where we now have a little bit more confidence on what the REMA says and what likely needs to change. So you're going to see some slides that show the language from the REMA. For example, here in Article 5.1, it talks about how the golf course property must be used exclusively for either golf course or as open space. And that's the only two things that it allows right now today. So if we were to go forward and execute on our plan, we need to be able to amend the REMA a little bit. Alex, I just realized I think we've gotten a little bit too far ahead of ourselves in this proposal. We've talked about where we started with in January, but we haven't covered where we've evolved to today. In our presentation, I believe we have some slides that show some of the product that we're looking to do. Alex, do you mind unmuting yourself?
Yeah, and some of that residential product will be shown in the design guidelines.
Okay, so for the audience here, I guess, Alex, I think we might want to jump to that before I talk to the REMA a little bit, because I think it's important for the folks to see, now that Forrest has covered the golf course, what are the residential things that will be changing to? And so Alan Bowden, I might turn it over to you for a little bit as Alex Hayes flips forward to, Alex, go back to the presentation. Let's go forward to the presentation that shows our new kind of land plan and the product that we're looking to have in there. And that, if that's in the design guidelines, then we can pull up in the design guidelines.
And here are the design guidelines.
Okay, so Alan, before we talk about design guidelines, you mind just kind of recapping how our plans changed from 800 and something units that had included apartments to something that's much lower, around the 300 something range?
Yeah, so the original plan that we had prepared was directed, as you put, Adam, on creating some open space in the community. And that original plan, we also looked at some potential residential development areas. And yeah, that was presented in the very first community meeting that we had. And yeah, that plan had over 800 units. And the most recent plan that we've done, the one that was just depicted on the plan that Forrest presented and the golf course layout. This plan has 4 different development areas that we have identified, and you'll see those within some graphics within the design guidelines. And our current unit count is 382 homes in the 4 different development parcels.
Alan, but let's pause for a second so Alex Hayes can bring up the more recent plan.
Okay. So here we go. Here's the overall plan. And you can see the golf course playing out here just in the same way that Forrest described it in terms of how the course plays. And he's done an outstanding job with the design of that. And then, as he indicated in his graphic, there were 4 different development parcels that we've been working with in my office at Norris Design. And so what you, just so you're aware, north is to your right, and south is to the left. So just kind of tweak your eye here with regards to how this is being presented. So the clubhouse is over on the left side. Our first development parcel that we have there is very, very small. We have proposed 8 units that would live like a resort type of living unit.
Alex, do you mind kind of hovering your mouse over the different area? There you go. And just showing the different areas where Alan Bowden's describing. Okay,
so area A, and so that's just south of the clubhouse. We would expect that the residents that are interested in purchasing a home there would be frequent members at the clubhouse and would probably most likely frequent that space. As we go to the west, and it'll be at the top of the image, in area B, we've identified a pattern of local streets there, with lots that are adjacent to those local streets, very much like the existing community that is the cotton fields internal to the area. We have a single point of entry in the center where the B is. That would be a primary arrival experience of that community. It would be a gated, there would be a gated element there. There's 2 additional connections to 59th Avenue, but we envision those being exit only. And that center location is the primary ingress and egress, with egress happening in a location to the north and to the south. As we move to the north, We have a townhome villa condition there where we've proposed units within buildings. So it is attached units in that case. As explained in the previous community meetings, we have envisioned, and the concept here envisions two different types of buildings. One type of building would be the smaller building, a cluster of 4 units that are attached. And then the other building that plays out in this plan is a cluster of 6 units that are attached. And all of those individual units, not buildings, contribute to the total unit count that's 382 homes. There's a central location for access where the gold star is. That would be the access point for ingress and egress. There would be a little community amenity where the purple is and where the letter C is. That would be a part of the arrival into that particular community. So far, what I've described is the new community and new residents would have access only on the periphery. They would not be accessing the internal Cotton Fields community at all. The final development unit is over on the east side. And it then has access off of the existing drive, the private drive that is your drive. There's a gate that's currently to the north, close to Southern Avenue. In order to make sure we can maintain these residents outside of your private community as well, we have proposed, and we want to continue to talk about it, moving that gate location to a point south of their access drive. So that would be your private entry into the community. And as we're working on the design guidelines, we're also thinking about what that arrival, what that new gated entry might look like. And that'll begin to appear in the design guidelines that we put on display. And we really would welcome your look at that and any feedback that you might give us with regards to what we're thinking about there. So 4 different housing types that are playing out in 4 different areas here of this plan. Adam, I'll turn it back to you unless you want me to cover anything more.
I think you might want to, since I don't really want to go through the full design guidelines, Alan, but I think it would be helpful if maybe you kind of walk through some of the representative images and some of the details that you've started to prepare to help demonstrate the different residential products.
Okay. Alex, do you have those slides? Very good. So we have begun to assemble design guidelines that we hope to share with all of you soon. As you probably know by now, we do have a web page where we're posting some of this material and the work that we've been doing. So we'll go through some of the pages within the design guidelines that are representative of the different types of products that are playing out there in those residential plans. We also have identified 4 different architectural styles that we'd like to push forward with regards to the new community. We think that these styles are somewhat compatible with your existing Cotton Fields community, and hopefully you do too. So one of them is the craftsman or bungalow style, which plays out, and so you can see some characteristic images of those, and I won't take too much time because this will be on display on the webpage soon, and you can read all the text to the left in terms of what's happening here. Next image, Alex. So this is a contemporary style that we would envision. Feels a little bit more modern. Again, there's some images that kind of describe what we're looking for. Part of our goal here is to come up with a development plan to work with you on whether or not we've created the correct vision. And then we'll start to talk with some of the national home builders or even local home builders that might begin to come in and partner with us on the development of this. So to the left, some text that describes the style. To the right, some images that also depict it. Next. And then the ranch style, which has been very popular and common in the Phoenix metropolitan area in recent times. It takes on a little different feel, and maybe here in Laveen, and we do know that the community, particularly the Laveen Village Planning Committee, is very active in trying to get an agricultural feel. So maybe this takes on a little character of modern farmhouse as well in the ranch style. That's what you see in the building facade with a board and batten treatment, which is the vertical type of condition of siding on the home that plays out here rather than, just, a typical stucco condition. So we're exploring those things in the design guidelines. We think it'll play well with regards to the design of a new community. Next. And then traditional Southwest, again, some images here with regards to the character of that, the character styles, the embellishments that might take place in the home, as well as the choice of color tends to be a little bit more affiliated with our surroundings and the mountains here in the Phoenix metropolitan area. Again, on the left is a description of what this is all about, and you'll all have access to the design guidelines here shortly in the posting. I believe that's the last one, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. If you go back to the prior presentation. So I think what we hope you'll start to see is, whereas we had a plan that started with 800 and something units in January with no golf course, and through the series of meetings we've had with neighbors and also smaller group meetings with folks, we've been able to identify key priorities and get feedback. And so as that feedback has been shared with us, we've learned how we need to make changes to our plan to restore this golf course and also create new residential opportunities that are compatible and on the same quality level as your community, or if not better. And so by preparing the residential design guidelines and identifying the product, we were able to go from 800 units down to 300 and gosh, Alan, I always get this number wrong. I think it's 340.
82.
382, there you go. And now we're at a place where I think we can begin to discuss what are the regulatory provisions in place with your REMA and what might need to change. So I kind of hit on this earlier, but right now under your REMA, there are restrictions. The only things that we can do right now on the golf course property on the 140 acres is golf course or open space. And now I think it's been since 2018 or 2019 since that golf course was last open, and the owner had allowed it to fall into disrepair. And now it's at a point where it's not really salvageable. It's sort of a restart all over again. Recognize it's going to take a significant amount of time to restore that golf course because you have to put new seed. New seed can only be planted at a certain time of year. You have to redo lakes and irrigation and fencing and new planting and landscaping and a new clubhouse. It's a big lift. And so as we start to evaluate the need to have some residential to help justify and support the cost that we need to inject into this new golf course, we need to be able to utilize some of the old golf course area to allow some of these homes. And the only way that can happen is if we amend this REMA. And so this is the language that we need to look at and recognize exists and what we likely need to adjust a little bit. Some of the next slides will show some other things here. To amend the REMA, it requires approval from three groups. One is the owner of the golf course, which is our client. Number two is the HOA board. And number three is 2/3 of the owners within your Cotton Fields community. And we know that those are high hurdles to overcome. And I think if we had asked members to take a vote on this in the beginning of January, we would have probably failed miserably. I think as this has progressed, and now that we've added golf course in and actually started to make some commitments on the time of the golf course, and started to know that what the product for the housing looks like and where that can be along the streets rather than right on the golf course behind homes, I think we're starting to see a bit of a shift of momentum and a willingness by a lot of folks to entertain this idea and move it forward. And we like the feedback we've been hearing enough that we are confident to take the next steps and begin to discuss the REMA. So you can see some of the next slides. I'll walk you through some of the things that we are looking to change in the REMA. So this chart is a very basic effort. It's not perfect. I'm certain there's probably a flaw or a mistake in this thing, and it's not meant to be exact. But what this is meant to be is a guide for me, so I knew what I need to change if I was to propose a REMA amendment. So the left column is the language in the REMA. The middle column is what I'm suggesting to change. And the right column is the reasons behind my suggestion. And I'm open to criticism, I'm open to new ideas, and frankly, I'm sure there will be something I have forgotten or missed that needs to be in here. So this is very preliminary, but I wanted to at least show you what I think we need to change. Under that first line, in page 3 of the REMA, it talks about landscaped areas and they're referenced in an exhibit. And as Forrest explained, we still will have lakes, but the shape of those lakes will adjust a little bit and shrink a little bit. And so we need to update that exhibit from the present condition to our newly proposed condition. I'm not proposing to change any of the language right there in that section. I'm just simply proposing to swap out an exhibit to reflect the new golf course design. On the second row of this table, it talks about cart path crossings in your REMA document. And it does allow that to be modified by the HOA. We think the language is good as it is, but we know that with the redesign of the golf course, some of these golf cart path crossings might need to be updated too. So I think it's probably minor and simple, but I don't want to overlook that. That's probably a new exhibit to be added into there as well. On the third row, that's the use restriction that says this property has to be used for golf course or open space. And I actually think that's really good language, and I don't necessarily want to change that language. I think that language is intentional and valuable for the enforcement and preservation of this golf course going forward. I do not want to change that language. Attached to that language, though, in the REMA is an exhibit. It's called Exhibit B. And this is kind of that second column right there on row 3. Exhibit B is where it defines the golf course boundary area. And so what I'm proposing we do is swap out that exhibit for a new exhibit that shows the new golf course boundary area, and thereby excluding these new residential development areas that we're proposing along Southern and along 59th Avenue. So again, I think the language is good. It's a swap out of the exhibit to reflect what Alan Bodwin just shared with you and what Forrest Richardson just shared with you. On the row number 4, that is, I think, a continuation of what I just described in Exhibit 3. Exhibit B in the REMA is a depiction of the golf course boundary, so I think we need to update that to reflect the new golf course design. On row number 5, I don't think this is particularly significant, but all changes, minor or major, need to be addressed. And on this one, it talks about the location of the lakes. We think our locations are the same, but because some of those lakes are shifting in form and size, it's probably important that we update that exhibit, which is called E1. And then on row number 6, it talks about the landscape areas around those lakes. And again, I think this is more of a minor thing, but nonetheless, I think it needs to be addressed. Because I think we will be adjusting, now that some of our lakes are shrinking, we still want to make sure we have landscaping around those lakes. And so exhibit E2 would reflect the new landscape areas around the lake. So if I could boil the REMA amendments down from these 6 things, for the most part, it's swiping out one exhibit for a new exhibit to reflect the new boundaries of the golf course. But I do like the language that's in the REMA today, and I don't think much of that, if any of it, really needs to change outside of updating some of these exhibits. But what I think is missing from the REMA are certain enforcement mechanisms and assurances that you as neighbors want to see before anything happens going forward. And so my next slide will talk about what I propose you add into the REMA if your group is willing to entertain it. For example, on this first line, I think it would be helpful to add into the REMA a timetable related to the golf course reconstruction and execution and how that looks. So, for example, I think what I'm proposing, if you look at the second column, I'm proposing that we add some language that we describe the minimum components that have to be in this new golf course. That way you have assurances that these things occur. A minimum of 18 holes, the putting greens, the renovated clubhouse, lake and landscape areas, view fencing, and other kind of amenities similar to the golf course simulators, the outdoor seating and the food service amenities. And we want to make sure that this golf course commences construction before any person can occupy any of the new homes we're building. I think it's important for us to earn your trust and to prove that by putting in a provision like this that requires us to commence the golf course construction before we can have people move into any of our homes. And so on that second line right there, where it talks about residential timing and construction, I'm proposing that, and I'm open to all ideas. I don't have any pride in this. This is just the beginning of a framework discussion. But on that second column on the row 2, I'm proposing that golf course reconstruction shall commence prior to the first certificate of occupancy of any residential structure on those parcels. And to actually put that into an exhibit F where we can lay out an entire schedule for development execution. And the whole reason why I want to do that is to ensure that golf course redevelopment starts before the residential starts and before any residential can be occupied. The third row on that list is a gate relocation. You have a gate as you come into your community from Southern that we have a few homes that are going to be essentially behind the gate, which we don't mind being behind the gate, but I think some folks in your community suggest that we might want to consider relocating the gate so that way our homes would be accessed before they pass through the gate. I think we're open to either scenario, but recognizing that that scenario requires requires the board approval and the community's approval to do that. And so if that is something that the community desires and the HOA desires, we would do that at our own costs and not at the cost of the community. But the whole point of all that is to make sure that the gate relocation is provided if that's what the community desires, or alternatively, they can allow us to access that gate for the few homes that we have beyond it. In any event, I think that language should be added into the REMA. On number 4, that row there, your roads within your community are private roads, which means your HOA pays for it, and they likely do that through assessments or dues that you guys pay as individual property owners. Because we will be using a certain portion of that road when we accessed it off of Southern, we want to make sure that we pay to your HOA our fair share of that roadway maintenance. It's not a long stretch of roadway, but enough that if we were going to use it, I feel like it's our obligation to help share in that cost with you. And it would likely be on a proportionate acre basis, so that way it's fair for everybody. Item number 5 is a good idea. It's sort of wasn't created by us. It was a suggestion from a neighbor as we started to have some small group meetings to talk about oversight committee, made up of residents in the Cottonfields community and the developer, so that way they can ensure that the golf course reconstruction happens at the time frame that we've committed to, that's implemented in the manner that we described, and that any other components like gate relocation, landscaping areas, and design guidelines all have some type of oversight committee to make sure it's done properly. I think you can see that I put a question mark because I'm not quite sure how to write the language, but I love the idea. And I think the idea just needs to be kind of finessed a little bit, but I think there's a lot of value there because it gives greater oversight and protections to the existing residents to make sure that we do what we say we're doing before we can occupy our residential homes. And then that last line is a legacy play card. And then this is an idea in its infancy, but we heard this in some of our earlier meetings and we think there's some merit to it. And so I think we're open to exploring what that might look like, but essentially giving a preferred right and potential pricing scheme or discount code for all the existing Cottonfields residents who would prefer and like to play golf here. And we think that would be transferable. So if you sell the house, your new owner could have the benefit of that too. It wouldn't be shareable, so you couldn't give it to your cousin or best friend to come play, but for the owner of the property, they have that type of right. We think it's a tremendous value to the existing owners in the Cottonfields community, and probably a good marketing factor to share if the time ever comes that you want to sell your house. So these are things that aren't in the REMA today that we think could be added into there to strengthen it and to make sure that what we're suggesting actually happens before we build any homes, because I think the biggest thing we are trying to earn is your trust. And the prior golf course operators have not been good, responsible operators. And I think that's why you see it in the condition it is. And the only way that we can make those assurances to you is to make sure that we build in a schedule that requires some of that golf course implementation before the residential execution. We'll move over to the next slide. Some other things that we are looking to do is when we file our application with the city, I haven't discussed this yet, but as much as I hope we can find support and approval on the REMA changes and actually create this new golf course, we still have to rezone the area where our new homes will be. And that's going to be a zoning application filed with the city of Phoenix. But some things that we are willing to do and commit to and write into the zoning application are rules and limitations that there can be no apartments, that there can't be any more than 382 homes, that we have to implement these design guidelines that Alan just shared, and that we cannot occupy any of these residential structures until we have sufficient construction of the golf course. And these things would be adopted into the legal ordinance that the city council would adopt and approve. So that way they become by default law. And the whole point of saying all this is, I don't know if you will find many developers willing to make that commitment, but I think we're very comfortable doing that because we recognize it's necessary to secure the buy-in from the community on the REMA, and more importantly, I think to honor the commitments that we've been making. And so we would be willing to put these things into the zoning document that then become part of the adopted ordinance, which then essentially becomes the law related to this land. And what that gives you as owners and residents and investors in the community is an additional enforcement mechanism. Whereas presently you have the REMA and the CCNRs, once an ordinance gets adopted at the city, then you can use that as a leverage point to make sure things are done properly. And the difference between your only REMA today and the REMA plus the zoning out ordinance is the city can issue zoning violations if we don't comply with this criteria. And after a while, those, if you get enough zoning violations, then they become civil. They convert from civil to criminal citations. And so your ability to influence the execution of this properly is only enhanced through the adoption of new zoning ordinance that incorporates these ideas. Next slide. So I think we've covered the design guidelines with Alan. I won't touch on that, but we're happy to discuss that on the question and answer part of the back end. I think a lot of people have asked us, what's the next steps? And so as we wrap up this meeting tonight, I want to just share with you what I think our next steps are. And this is a very raw schedule. It's only as good as the moment I'm saying it, because the longer it takes for us to execute and get the required number of votes for the REMA, the more likely this schedule will push out. But what we would like to do is, if you look at that fourth line where it says City of Phoenix zoning pre-application meeting, our next step is to meet with the city to share this proposal and discuss the zoning aspect and the conditions that we're willing to make. And then we would like to be able to begin discussing the REMA with your community in September and October. We really would like to take it forward to a vote in October, if possible. So that way we can start to figure out if there is enough required voters to support this change. The reality is we can't execute this great plan and the golf course redevelopment or the homes unless we have the 2/3 vote by the owners of the community. That's a lot of work for us to do. We have a plan in place and we feel confident we can get there, but it's not going to happen without your participation. And that's why we're doing this virtual meeting today, because if you don't live in Arizona, you haven't attended our prior meetings, we definitely want you to be aware of all the work we've done and where this is headed and why we're so optimistic. So we hope to be able to finalize the REMA that we would like to propose. We'd love to share it with your HOA board and see if they have some feedback that we haven't considered that we need to include. But ultimately, we would like to take this to the residents of your community and see if your community would be willing to support the REMA amendment. If we are successful with the REMA amendment, then we are very confident in moving forward with the golf course redesign, even though we don't have the rezone approved yet. And so if you look at the about midway point of this schedule here, where it says submit golf course plans to the City of Phoenix, if we're successful in getting the REMA amended in October, then we would be willing to submit our plans to the city in November, December for a site plan. That site plan would include the golf course and would allow us to get started on the execution of that. There's a lot of plan approvals that the city has to do before we can just start touching the dirt and regrading the property. But we're willing to kind of kick that off in November and December if we can be successful with the REMA amendment in October. And I hope you'll appreciate that. We are doing that in advance of us even knowing if we'll even get the zoning approved, because we believe so much in this concept and plan. If the neighbors are willing to put their trust in us to approve the REMA, we're willing to submit our plans to the city at risk, even though we don't have the full zoning approved, because we would be confident enough in that collaborative effort. We probably file the zoning application around November or so. And that zoning application will take us to different public hearings like the village planning committees 2 times. We'll have to go to the planning commission, we'll have to go to the city council meeting. And we think that the process will probably take us out to May or June before the city council will say yes. But we don't want to wait until May or June to actually start the golf course. Our hope is that we can get the plans approved from the city sometime in the spring, and then maybe do some grading in the summertime if we can get our grading plan approved by the city in time. That grading plan would probably be considered what they call at risk, which means we don't have the full approvals on all the other city documents, but at a minimum, we would be willing to take the risk of regrading the site to start to form the golf course and shape it properly. And the reason why we're willing to do that is for us to play golf and to have new grass. There's only a narrow window in the Arizona heat and desert temperature when you can plant grass and where it can actually take hold and grow. And we don't want to miss that window. So if we miss that window, then essentially it's going to push us out a whole nother year, because that window is a very limited time. What we hope will happen, and why we're willing to do the golf course plans early to the city before our zoning is approved, and why we're willing to try to grade the property before the zoning is finally done, is because we need to hit that window. And if we miss that window, I'm afraid we're going to be stalled for a year, because that window is so critical to the golf course, to the grass actually taking hold and growing strongly. But if we can execute the plan that way, then I think we're playing golf in 2025. Now, if I was to just restore the golf course, it's going to take at least a year or longer, even if I didn't have to go through this process. If I just took your existing course today to go back and re-permit it and to rebuild it, to rip out the old inefficient and dead and non-functioning equipment, and then restore it to new equipment, build new cart barns and clubhouse amenities, and restore and reline golf course lakes, reroute the pump flow for the irrigation between 2 lakes, that's going to take us a year to year and a half anyways. And so what I think this will do is just lets us create a better design golf course. It will be a little bit of a longer timeline, but not substantially longer than what it would take if I just rebuilt the new one, the existing one today. So this is a rough schedule. Frankly, I can tell you that if the REMA takes longer to get approved in October, it will push this whole schedule back. But I feel like between our efforts with the community so far and what we hope to execute in September and October, we very well could find a pathway forward with the REMA Amendment in October and our overall project going ahead. I think this is probably one of our last slides for now. I don't know, Alex, if we have something next. Okay, good. So I appreciate the time you gave us. And the reason why it was important for us to do this meeting is a lot of you are attending virtually because you could not attend in person, but you have a lot of questions that we probably have not been able to answer. And I want to make sure that we can answer them. And to the extent that it's just me or Forrest or Alan or anybody else on our team, we would love to do our best to answer them. And if I don't know the answer, I'll go track it down and find it and call you back or email you tomorrow. But Alex, let's take questions. And I encourage everybody again, if you have a question, all you need to do is type your name in the chat box, and then Alex will call on your name in the order that it's typed in the chat box. So Alex, do we have anybody in the chat and who's typed their name in the chat box yet?
Yeah, it looks like we had a question from Norma. Norma, do you want to unmute and ask that question?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
We got you.
How are you, Norma?
Hi, well, I'm one of the owners of the lots with the water view lot, and I'm concerned about reducing the size of the lake in my area. I wasn't able to quite see the design so that I could see the configuration.
Norma?
Yes.
Let me pause real quick. Alex, while she's talking, I think it'd be good to have the plan up that shows the lakes, because her question's probably best directed if we can have a visual of it. And then Forrest, I'm going to ask you to maybe respond to Norma's question, because I think you know it best. So Norma, sorry to cut you off, but I think the visual would be helpful for us.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Hold on, Forrest. Let's get the exhibit up, and then let's let Norma describe which lake are you near, Norma, the North Lake or the South Lake?
I'm not sure. I think it's the north one, near Southern.
Okay, very good. All right, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, so you were describing the reduction of the size of the lake, and I'm wanted to get a better visual and idea of what that encompasses because I paid a premium for the waterfront view lot and want to make sure that that's not going to be impaired in any kind of way. That was my first question. And then my second question had to do with, I actually, quite frankly, I did not know that the driving range had been sold off separately and wanted to propose perhaps a driving range um, in lieu of some of the other expansion of the holes and of the proposed golf course.
Great question. Forrest, before you answer the question about the lake, Norma, I'll try to answer the driving range a little bit. That's on the baseline side, and on this exhibit it says future church. That was sold off a long time ago before we had any role or ownership here by prior owners and decision makers. I don't know the reason or why that was sold off, but we don't have ability to restore that. But I think after Forrest answers your question about lake, I'd like him to kind of answer the ability of a golf course, I mean a driving range elsewhere, and the value of the golf simulators.
Yeah, well, Norma, so the lake that you live on, which maybe Alex can show with his cursor, is the lake that I described earlier. And what currently, I don't think that you would notice a huge difference there. It basically, our plan is currently, and this is just preliminary, would be to just slightly reduce the perimeter size of the lake and then add in colorful landscaping and enhance the landscaping around the lake. One of the things we need to do is get a trail for the golf carts and the golfers through that area that would connect the west side with the center portion of the golf course. And we also want to remove the pump station that's there. So that pump station, our plan currently is to relocate it underground to the lake that's south by the clubhouse area, the one that's way to the south on the finishing hole. So the benefit for you would be that the pump station would go away and there would be extra landscaping. And I don't hold me to this, but right now we're thinking about give or take 15 feet or so. So not quite as wide as your current garage. That's the only dimension we're talking about changing the lake, is around the outside is lessening it by about 15 feet. And that's just an estimate. And I really
Is
don't
that the actual water or is it the landscaping around the lake?
No, the water would be shrunk a little bit. And again, that's to meet state guidelines. So when this golf course was originally built, which you may not be aware, but it was built as 36 holes. So where your house is used to be a second golf course. And 20 some years ago, they got rid of the second golf course and they built your homes where you live now. And the state guidelines are currently 2.6 acres, I believe it is the maximum surface area for lakes on an 18-hole golf course. And right now we're at about 3 acres or a little bit over. So what we're trying to do is get as close as we can to the state guidelines. And the slight lessening of the water surface area of the big lake that you live on, I really don't think you would notice it. It's really a you're still going to see a big lake there. It's just going to have more landscaping around the perimeter. And in the last meeting we had some comments about different homeowners wanting to make sure that their view wasn't obstructed. And of course, that's part of what I do is when we plant trees and add landscaping is we make sure that we're doing what you want. It's funny, some people don't want a tree behind their house and other people want a tree. So one of my jobs in this project will be working with my staff will be to when we do the landscaping around the perimeter of the golf course is to make sure that we're not obstructing views and we're leaving the same, if not better, landscaping behind your house. So that's the best way I can describe it right now. I think that if you went out there today and you took let's say a 15-foot line and went in around the edge of the lake and rebuilt the lake, I really don't think you would notice a huge difference. If anything, there would be more colorful landscape areas around the lake. Now, the second question about a driving range is, for a driving range, we need about 450 to 500 feet in width, and there's just simply no place on the golf course. You can see the corridors that go up, through between homes and along 59th Avenue and between the center portion where you have homes on the left and the right, the west and the east. There's just no place where we have 500 feet to build a driving range. So the reality is that while we would like to have a driving range, one of the new trends in golf is these indoor simulators, which are very popular and allow players to have a similar experience, but indoors and at night, and in more of a top golf setting, if you will, where they have ability to have bar service and food and hors d'oeuvres and seating. So you can see here, Alex has put up the clubhouse plan, and we've located these simulators outdoors adjacent to the putting green. There would be 6 of them. They would have roll-up doors. That's the concept plan. And they would be open for practice. And then at night, during the, clubhouse grill hours, they would form a new amenity for the community and the golf course where even non-golfers could have a lot of fun. Similar, if you've been to Top Golf or if you've seen pictures of Top Golf, this is very similar, where you can play famous courses around the world and hit balls into a backdrop and get data on who hit furthest and who hit most accurate. So that help answer your questions? Was that useful?
Thank you, Norma. Alex, who else do we have next in the chat?
How about Mike D? Mike, are you able to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I'm here. So I got a couple questions. So the first one is, why could they not, instead of moving the gate, why can't they make the entrance off of 53rd?
Great question, Alex. Let's pull up the that exhibit that for the new product off of Southern.
All right, I'm gonna figure out how to stop the share here. Talking about the land plan?
Yeah.
And Adam, I thought you said you don't play very much golf. I remember.
Well, I'm embarrassed. Honestly, I used to play. This is a little sub story, but I used to throw my daughter in the car seat, and I'd put her in the golf cart, and I'd play on summertime because I could get it for like $10 or $13, and I'd prop the bottle up on her blanket so she would just feed this bottle. She was like 2 years old, and I could golf, and it was great. But I have 5 kids, so I don't have time for any hobbies these days. But I do golf.
Oh my God,
a couple of
that
times
is a hobby.
Yeah.
5 kids is a hobby, my friend.
Yeah. So I love to golf more, but I think my wife would kill me if I said, hey, I've worked 48 hours this week and now I'm going to go spend 6 hours on a Saturday. Oh, and have fun with the kids.
Understood.
So let's look at this exhibit here. The area in yellow, Alex, you might want to kind of hover over area D. So if you look at area D, that's the land that we're proposing to build homes just like your community. But the gate, Alex, hover over the gate, is right there off of Southern. And so the only way to get to that is through that. We don't own the parcel that's vacant land between Southern Avenue and us. So we have no actual access way to this piece but through that private road. And so the question is, if we can if we can grant access to this little group through your community, we would pay what the required proportionate share to make it possible. But if certain folks in your community said, you know what, we really need the gate turnaround moved elsewhere, we would do that too. Frankly, it has to be one way or the other, because without that component, we don't have a land plan that we can bring forward to REMA or to the city.
Okay, understood. And then back to the lake question. So currently there's nobody that could walk around that lake. And from my understanding from the proposed plan is that it will be available for people to walk behind our houses around that lake. Is that correct?
Are we talking about I think you're talking about the North Lake, right?
Yes, I'm talking about the large lake, correct?
Forrest, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, well, there would be a cart path there that would be, we envision, on the south side of the lake that would connect the western portion of the golf course to the center portion. And
So
I think it would
is there
be up
one on
to
the north? Is there one on the north side too? Because it looks like it is on this picture.
Our intention currently is the south side, because that's where the pump station would be relocated from.
And Mike, just, you know, these, I get what you're saying. These white lines that are kind of the boundaries are not actual golf.
Yeah,
Paths. Those are just sort of like,
right.
Yeah.
We see
Okay,
it being on the south side, Mike, and the reason for that is there's a little more room there currently, and whether or not those cart paths would be used by the HOA would be something that we have discussed in meetings. There, I think there's a general feeling that the HOA would like to have access to the golf course and cart paths after hours and at some times, and this is something that I hear Levine 140 listening and being very open to trying to figure out how we might accommodate that. Right now, as you know, the golf course is off limits to
Right.
you know, anyone except golfers, and so I think there's an open mind there, and I'm not, I don't mean to misspeak here and represent the developer, but I believe that there's a genuine interest in trying to figure out, well, how would we make that happen, and what hours would it be, and you know, that sort of thing. So I think we'd encourage you to give us feedback on that. If it's something that you would like to have, then we would certainly, I think, try to make it happen.
Okay. And then my last question is back to the driving range. I know that the original driving range was was sold to the church. However, the amount of land that's available on the original hole 1, could that not be converted into a range with nets?
Well, the answer to that question is that no, nets would not be allowed because of the overhead utilities. And so we would never have the possibility of any netting along 59th Avenue because of the power lines. Is there?
Oh, no, not 50 on hole 1, which is off of 57th Ave. The original hole 1 was off of 57th facing east, I think it was.
No, that's only about maybe 280 feet wide or something, and again, we need 400 or 500 feet. So I'm sorry, I was thinking you were talking about the west side. My bad.
No worries. I understand. Well, okay. Well, thank you for your information. I appreciate it.
Great questions, Mike. Thanks for asking. Alex, who do we have next?
Go ahead, Adam. The only reason you still had air in your tires is we didn't know which car was yours.
Yeah. Look, I felt the pressure. I sweated through my clothes that night, and I still sweat today, but a little bit less.
We waited to see what you got in.
Well, I appreciate you guys' patience. Like, the reality is, your community has been generously patient with us, and I knew that if I came back with the same proposal, I wouldn't live to tell the day. I hope folks will see that maybe this plan isn't perfect, but it's come a long way from where we started, and I think people will start to recognize that the way it's adapted is largely because of your feedback collectively as a group, and hopefully we can find that support. Alex, who do we have next?
Comment. Norma, I see your comment. Thank you for that. Norma said driving range alternative makes sense. I don't want people walking behind my house. But nobody else has put their name in the chat. Are there any other
Well,
questions out there?
There's got to be more questions. I know we have not scratched the surface, a lot of folks. So, I mean, guys, I'd love to go home, but I'll stay as long as we need to. So, are there any other questions? And I think at this point, since we don't have a big queue of people in the chat, just feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, actually, Alex, I think you probably have to.
No, they can unmute themselves.
They can unmute themselves, right?
Yeah, and if you can't, just put your name in the chat and I'll unmute you.
So please, ask us a question that maybe we haven't thought or addressed yet. Okay,
Hi, this is Norma again.
cool. Fire away, Norma.
All right. I'll just throw it out there anyway, see what happens. Any thoughts of adding an indoor swimming pool?
Well, that's a great question because that's what we started with. Oh, actually, indoor. Oh boy, we had not thought of that. We did think about adding a swimming pool through our first like 2 or 3 meetings of the year, from about January to about April. We were showing a swimming pool in the plans, but then in a weird way, there was folks didn't want a swimming pool, and we were trying to say we'll build it as part of the clubhouse for the benefit of the residents, but we didn't find anybody who wanted it. In fact, some people were, I remember one guy at the meeting kind of mocking us for thinking that that was an idea worth any merit. So we don't have a swimming pool plan anymore.
Okay. And the townhouses, those are going to be sold townhouses, not rentals.
Right.
A little bit concerned about that, but we'll see.
Well, okay. I'm glad you brought it up. That's a very normal and natural concern, and something that I think, if you have a concern, I'd love to point you into a spot not too far from where you live, where you can go see something similar to kind of what we have in mind. We think there's a buyer class who wants to own a home but not have to deal with the maintenance of the yard and all the kind of things that come with home ownership. And we think there are probably folks who have been owners for a long time who might be looking for a different type of ownership experience. Alan Bowden, do you want to kind of describe the inspiration of your townhome product based on the other stuff that's been built near golf courses in Phoenix?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to work a little bit on the Legacy community, which is essentially at 32nd Street and just north of Baseline. And there's a builder that went in really near the clubhouse, just
That's an existing golf course community too, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And there's a builder Cache that went in and built at the Legacy Golf Course, and those homes are within 500 within 500 feet of the clubhouse, and so it's lived very well.
And those homes, I think, are selling a bit of a premium as well.
They are doing very well.
Very well. And so we just think, Norma, we think it could be a complementary residential type for the project. But the Cache homes, the one we direct you to go see, because I think that would give you a lot more confidence on the quality and the price point of kind of what we're hoping to achieve here.
Sort of like luxury townhomes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Alex, did anybody else maybe type their name in the chat?
See any other names?
Okay. So with that, I'm going to say my last comments for today. And if an idea comes to you, you still have a chance to type your name in the chat. But I would say this. Thank you for giving us the grace to just be patient. I know we stumbled pretty hard and failed in the first meetings. I think our pride thought got the best of us. I think we thought we had this great plan, everybody would love it, and we learned pretty quick that was a huge mistake. And we did not rush into create a new plan. We realized we needed to hear more feedback, work with smaller groups, work with bigger groups, work with smaller groups, work with bigger groups. And the only way I know to adapt the plan to change it is with that participation. So for many of you who've been on this meeting, have probably attended those meetings, thank you for that feedback. It is a far better plan than when we started. We still have a lot of work to do. And I can't get any further with this unless the REMA is amended. So I hope that you'll give me a little bit more patience while I try to, I think, polish up what I think a REMA amendment will look like on paper. And my next goal is to ask your HOA if I can come and present to them these ideas. I will not ask them for a vote on the first meeting and probably not even the second meeting. I just think I have to spend time with them like I've been trying to spend time with you guys. And if I can help the HOA understand the why behind a proposal and how it's evolved, I hope they'll start to see it makes good sense, like a lot of the folks in this room and in-person meetings have done too. Ultimately, I will need your support. I'll probably ask you, beg you, please come over and wash your dishes and mow your lawn if that's what it takes to get a yes vote. But we're committed to doing this properly and no faster than it needs to be for you guys to be comfortable with it. But our game plan is hopefully to come out to the community in September or October and try to collect the required number of signatures. And I want to do that in participation with your HOA. And I hope that they'll give us a chance to present to them so they can hear what you're hearing and give us feedback that we can implement going forward. So you might not hear from us for a little bit. It's only going to be because we're spending time retooling things, but the next notice you might receive from me might have more information specifically about the REMA. Alex is going to update the website so it has a lot of this information we discussed today. So if you ever want to go back to the website, you can go to that as a resource for the kind of information that we're sharing now. And I think what we'll try to do is host this presentation on there so you can share it or talk to other people or pull it up if there's a question. Alex and I are just an email or phone call away. I know that tomorrow morning you'll wake up and think, oh, I wish I would have asked this question. So just reach out to us. We'll try to connect you with other folks if it's not us that can't answer it. But thank you for your patience. Please, please be mindful of what we need to get this done. And to the extent that you have thoughts or input that we haven't considered, we are open to those ideas. And I guess I'll end it with that and just grateful that you guys gave us the time tonight.